Can Jalen Hurts be an improved Kyler Murray just because of the way he goes about doing his business and the leader that he already is with the Eagles? Or is the talent level just not as good as Kyler Murray's for Jalen Hurts here in Philly?
Well, yeah, I think both are part of the equation, certainly. And anytime you do have those intangibles, that's a positive. But you still have to get the job done, obviously, on the field for those intangibles to mean anything. And I think Hurts has certainly shown progress in his time as a starter for the Eagles. He's a little bit bigger guy than Kyler Murray, so hopefully in his case he can be durable, which is always the question when you have a quarterback that likes to run a lot. Certainly in the passing department, I mean, Kyler Murray it's his accuracy, all those things are just off the chart in terms.
Mag guys, it's the usual grouping on the show, but John McMullen's already left to go to Eagle practice, so it's yours truly with Ric Serritella. We got Howard Balzer on the live from Arizona. Appreciate him getting up early for us. Damn, Balzer, you're a good guy to get up this early.
For you guys, I'll get up at any time you want.
What's happening, Howard? Thanks for joining us out there in the desert. I know you're getting ready to head out to Cardinals camp, and we were just talking about none other than Mr. Kyler Murray, who's in the news again. Never seems to be for the positive reasons. What's the status here? He's going to miss at least the next 5 practices or so?
Well, it was really strange yesterday when you say at least, because, Cliff Kingsbury, I think, who delivers a lot of the news to us, sometimes doesn't get things totally right. I mean, he says he has to be out 5 games, at least 5, but then says, but if he gets a negative test, he can come back before that. So then why even mention the 5 games? Just say he's got COVID, and when he tests negative, he can return. And so it's pretty wild. But like you said, this entire offseason has been a soap opera, which I term the young and the restless. And now it's the really restless or resting right now, certainly. But, man, I don't know if you could write a book that would really be able to translate or discuss everything that's happened with this guy since right after the end of last season that led up to the new contract, all the controversy with that looked like, okay, that was all behind. And then on Friday, he was seen, the doctors were seen kind of like working with his wrist during practice, and then did not practice on Saturday, which was the first fan practice of training camp on, of course, with the NFL Dubs. We're all back together Saturday. And then, of course, we find out yesterday about the COVID test. So it just seems that one thing piles up on itself for this guy. But, we'll see where it goes from here. But, he needs to get on the same page with his receivers. But then again, Marquise Brown hasn't been practicing since the start of camp because of a alleged hamstring injury. And you wonder if there might be something with the contract going on with him, because he scheduled guys to make only a little over $2 million this year. And now we've seen in the last several days the contracts that DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel received, which of course are far and away exceeding what Marquise Brown is getting. So still a lot of stories that surround this team that you wonder about some of them if we're getting the straight information.
There is a new narrative every day on Kyler Murray. You've been on top of it all year, Howard. But I want to kind of jettison ahead to the end, because I was surprised by Ricky's take earlier. He said that he doesn't believe that every single Cardinal teammate rallies behind Murray when he's calling the plays in the huddle, or will not in this upcoming season. Has he, because of all of the drama that's been surrounding him, lost some of his teammates that will do what they have to do because it's their job and they got to worry about their own production, but aren't being led by their quarterback the way most quarterbacks lead their team around the league? Has Kyler Murray lost some respect amongst his teammates out there in Arizona?
There's always been the belief that is the case, but it comes from us on the outside. Certainly the players aren't going to admit it publicly. The players say similar things like, well, every player, every quarterback leads differently. And the way Kyler Murray leads is perhaps different than other guys. But I think he has to make sure that he's doing the right thing along those lines, because, man, when they're winning, everything is great. and he's smiling, he's happy, everybody's happy. When they start losing some games and the team overall isn't playing well, that's where the questions arise, where he starts making decisions on the field that show frustration, where he throws his arms up in the air when a receiver like A.J. Green last year doesn't come back for the ball, and an interception is the result. So I think that this is a part of his game, a part of his stature as a quarterback that has to improve and has to get better. And it'll all be in how he plays and whether this team can win, not only win consistently, but of course play well at the end of the season. And I think though that he has to show that strength that it's all about when you hit adversity, right? And he has to show that strength that when adversity comes, that he can be that guy that everybody else on the team feels, okay, he's got it together. He knows what's going on. And the one aspect of it is the last 2 seasons, he's been injured at the end of the year. And he hasn't played as well. Others haven't played as well. And then he doesn't handle it that well. And I've always said, with all the talk about everything, that's the elephant in the room for him, is staying healthy for 17 games. And he hasn't been able to do that the last 2 years. And the results on the field show it because he hasn't played as well.
Yeah, I think there's some serious maturity issues personally, but let's not put all the blame on Kyler for this fiasco, because we all heard about the homework clause and he must do his 4 hours a week. It seems like that was handled pretty poorly by the Cardinals front office, right? Because, I mean, if that was the case, couldn't we just have pulled Kyler aside? And I know Kyler claimed maybe he didn't see that language in the contract, but after
No, I think Ricky's breaking up on it. So, Howard, I'm going to try and follow his question.
Well, yeah,
How much blame do you put on the Cardinals for the whole homework clause thing? They did get it put in. It was there. If Kyler didn't read it, that's kind of on Kyler. But do you think the organization mishandled it?
Yeah, it's on the agent, too. And now there's rumblings that maybe he's not happy with the agent. At his press conference after agreeing to the contract, he said, well, a lot of the stuff that happened in the offseason with things said, I give him, referring to his agent, who was sitting there in the front row, by the way, I give him a lot of crap. And so, but yeah, the Cardinals were the one to put it in. But here's the interesting thing. Steve Keim, the general manager, told us all that he and Cliff Kingsbury went to Texas during the offseason, where Kyler spends most of his time, met with him, met with his family, and laid out their expectations. So aren't a big part of those expectations the things that we expect you to do as a pro? And I think what that the homework clause also did was it escaped some of the focus that there would have been on another clause in his contract, which pays him over $9.3 million in the last 6 years of this deal for participating in the offseason program. And obviously that's another thing they're saying, hey, we need you here in the offseason. You want to get better, the team want to be better, you need to be here for those voluntary workouts. And so I'm sure they laid that out in their expectations, but then felt compelled to put those money bonuses in his contract for it. Nobody hardly ever talks about that because of the, quote, homework clause. I personally believe, guys, that the owner, Michael Bidwell, was behind a lot of that, especially that clause, because of things that he had seen. I've seen things written that says there was never a question about Kyler Murray's work ethic until that clause. Well, that's not true. He admitted to the New York Times in a story during last season that he's not a big fan of watching a lot of tape. So a lot of this he's brought on himself. But I think Michael Bidwell had, a little issue with the agent, who questioned him on several occasions in the offseason about his commitment to win. And Michael Bidwell's a little thin-skinned guy. So, but all in all, it was handled poorly. Then to take it out, and then to say, well, we were surprised by the reaction to it? Really? Seriously? You didn't think when this came out that everybody was going to go crazy about it? It's just crazy. But there's stories that Bidwell was urged not to put it in the contract, and was urged by those in the organization not to do it. So I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of all of it specifically, but it has been very poorly handled by pretty much everyone.
All right, Howard, let me comp the two quarterbacks that we've been talking about here on the show today. Kyler Murray with you, and Jalen Hurts previously before you came on with us, because we are Birds 365. Both of them went to Oklahoma. Kyler Murray wins the Heisman. Jalen was one of the Heisman finalists, didn't win it. But in that same offense under Lincoln Riley, comparable numbers that they put up while in college against each other. And Murray, because he's a year earlier, has now already gotten paid. Jalen Hurts, we're all debating here as to whether he's ever going to get paid or not. Kyler has done a little bit more in the NFL than Jalen has. But no one questions Jalen Hurts' work ethic and how much of a leader is he with Philadelphia. What do you see when you look at those two former Oklahoma quarterbacks, major part of their game being similar, and both of them can run with the football? Can Jalen Hurts be an improved Kyler Murray just because of the way he goes about doing his business and the leader that he already is with the Eagles? Or is the talent level just not as good as Kyler Murray's for Jalen Hurts here in Philly?
Well, yeah, I think both are part of the equation, certainly. And anytime you do have those intangibles, that's a positive. But you still have to get the job done, obviously, on the field for those intangibles to mean anything. And I think Hurts has certainly shown progress in his time as a starter for the Eagles. He's a little bit bigger guy than Kyler Murray, so hopefully in his case he can be durable, which is always the question when you have a quarterback that likes to run a lot. Certainly in the passing department, I mean, Kyler Murray it's his accuracy, all those things are just off the chart in terms of passing the football. I think that's where Jalen Hurts, that's where Lamar Jackson, quite frankly, come up a little bit short, no pun intended, when you start comparing them to Kyler Murray. But, the package is there for all these guys to be successful. But, so far, hey, we look at, what's the, and I don't like to put it all in the playoff record, because when you get into the postseason, you're playing the best teams in your conference when it starts out. But all these three quarterbacks, what do they have? I think combined 7 playoff appearances, with Jackson having 5, and there's only been 1 victory by Jackson from all those guys. So certainly the postseason is where you also have to shine. But they're still young, and Hurts is still young, and I think this is a key year for him to improve on some of the things that we've talked about. Accuracy, though, I don't know if you ever improve that totally, because I think a certain amount of that is part of your DNA. But I'm not saying he's a bad passer. But in terms of Murray, I mean, when you look at his total package, he's off the chart with everything he can do. The one thing is his size, and that's always going to be a question. I mean, let's look at this new contract. He's going to be 31 years old in the last year of this contract. So what's it going to look like durability-wise as he starts to get older? And, Kurt Warner, of course, the Hall of Fame quarterback who played for the Cardinals, he said a couple of weeks ago, the one area that Kyler Murray has to improve at is throwing in the pocket and not leaving too soon. But throwing the pocket a lot of times means having throwing lanes, being protected, and all those things, and being patient. And so, that's one area, obviously, where he has to get better. And he also has tremendous talent around him. I mean, Murray, with the receiver core he has compared to Hurts and even Jalen Ramsey, there's no comparison with the guys that Murray has to complement him.
Well, both the Cardinals and Eagles, I think, have playoff expectations, it's safe to say, going into the season. Week 5 opponents, who knows? Maybe that one-game matchup could decide who's in, who's out when it's all said and done in the end. Give us the skinny. How does this matchup break down? You mentioned they brought in Hollywood Brown. They have a plethora of wide receivers. Surprisingly, though, they were pretty balanced offense, I believe, in terms of percentages. I know Chase Edmonds is gone. Give us the lowdown here on how these two teams stack up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting comparison, and who knows what the teams are going to look like when Week 5 rolls around. But one thing we know is DeAndre Hopkins won't be there for the Cardinals, and so that's going to be very intriguing to see how this core looks when the season opens with the addition of Brown. They believe that A.J. Green, even at the age of 34, can still play and will be able to play better this year. He had some communications issues and learning a new way of playing, which is the way Cliff Kingsbury runs the offense, with no huddle and a lot of hand signals. And up tempo and things like that, which Green wasn't accustomed to. And they expect to use Rondale Moore a whole lot more also. So I think they match up really interestingly. And I think also that when you look at this conference, certainly overall, it's not as strong at the top as the AFC. And so, how you do in these key matchups with teams that have those playoff aspirations, obviously, a lot of times can make the difference. So, but you mentioned Chase Edmonds not being there and the balance that was there last year, Rick. And there's sometimes things get put in the pigeonhole, so to speak, when a team doesn't play well, like the Cardinals didn't at the end of last season. And it's pointed to that, well, Kingsbury's never finished strong and Kyler Murray had some issues, but the running game, and not only the running aspect of it, but the running backs with James Conner and Chase Edmonds, you go back and look at the first 8 games last season when the Cardinals were 7-1, and both those guys were healthy. They were on the field together. Edmonds had most of the snaps, about 60% to 42%, and they had a great, time sharing type of thing. Well, then Edmonds got hurt in the next game on the first play, and then after that he missed several games, and all of a sudden Conner was going from playing about 40 to 42% of the snaps to 70, 80. He had 2 games where he had played over 90% of the snaps. Then Edmonds came back and Conner got hurt from, I believe, being overworked. And then Edmonds played over about 82 and 90% of the snaps in 2 games that Conner wasn't there. And those guys only played together once in the last 9 regular season games. And that affected the offense, and Hopkins got hurt and a lot of other things. So they need to not only find a backup running back to Conner now with Edmonds gone, and it could be Darrell Williams, who's been with the Chiefs for 4 years. It could be Eno Benjamin, who's been with the Cardinals for 2 years and looks ready to ascend. But not only do they have to decide who's going to be the guy, but then to make sure to use them and not overwork James Conner. I think if they can do that and have some balance within that offense like they had last year, they can still be a very dangerous team offensively.
And these 2 quarterbacks we're talking about, former Oklahoma quarterbacks, will be facing off week number 6. Don't forget, Eagles and Cardinals play early this season. One of the reasons why we're having Howard Balzer on with us today. All right, let's say you're off to Cardinal practice today and your cell phone rings while you're in the car, and you can put it up on Bluetooth because we know you got to go hands off. And you recognize it as a Westchester County number outside of New York. And you punch it up, and Howard, this is Roger Goodell. Can I pick your brain for a minute? I got a pretty big decision I got to make here in the next 48 hours. Whole appeal thing with the Deshaun Watson situation. I've certainly done a lot of research on it, but I'm kind of sitting on the fence. Howard, you kind of been around this league as long as I have, if not more so. You've been through it all. I'm the guy who's under the microscope right now, but I'm looking for a little helping hand. What kind of advice would you give Roger Goodell as to whether he should just accept Sue Robinson's decision as a 6-game suspension? Should he try and add to it? If so, how much? How is he going to handle his statement when he makes one? I know it'll go to paper, but he at some point going to have to answer to the media as to why he made the decision he did. What kind of advice would you give Roger Goodell if he called you today?
It's a great question. Because, and by the way, I thought you had me on this because I grew up in Philly. And of course, had a lot of time there, but that's another story for another day. But what I was just doing, I was scratching my head because I'm scratching my head and trying to figure out why Judge Robinson reached the conclusion she did when she said that she found Watson not to be remorseful and guilty of nonviolent,
sexual harassment.
Yeah, sexual harassment, and then 6 games for that with the number of cases there were. Now I know the NFL only presented 4, but she has to know what else is there. And then you look at it in the context, and I know they're different, they're different policies in the NFL, but DeAndre Hopkins has what he claims to be a trace amount of a banned substance, and he's suspended 6 games. Calvin Ridley of the Falcons wagers $1,500 online on a parlay during the season last year. He gets a full season. I realize those strike to the integrity of the game, but fans and the public look at that and say, this really doesn't make any sense. The flip side is Roger Goodell and the league, for that matter, because it's quote the league, which are his investigators. They're the ones who have to say, no, this isn't right, and then decide whether to appeal or not. And then it goes to Roger Goodell for a decision. I'm sure on one level they don't want to prolong this too much. It's been going on, obviously, for a tremendously long time. Now, I know the statement the other day from the NFLPA said they will accept Sue Robinson's decision. Well, if the league doesn't accept it, then that statement doesn't mean anything. So right. Goodell could decide what he wants to decide, and then Deshaun Watson could still appeal. And how long does this continue to go on? I think most logical people look at this and say, this guy should have gotten more games, whether it should have been a full year, whether it should have been 8 games, whether it should have been 10. I mean, who's to say what's actually right about that? But 6 seems awfully lenient, especially when you consider what the judge wrote about it. It just seems to be a disconnect there.
One more, Howard, if I could sneak it in here, because I know you're off to the NFL Hall of Fame out there in Canton, and you do have an NFL Hall of Fame vote. Eagles fans excited. Dick Vermeil will be closing down the ceremonies as the final speaker. I guess I know you guys are not allowed to talk about those conversations behind closed doors, but your personal opinion, I mean, what took so long to get Vermeil into the Hall?
Well, first of all, it's been very hard for coaches to get in, and that's one of the reasons that the separate coach category was, they decided to do it. The Hall of Fame did, the board of directors, just like they decided to do the separate contributors category. I believe it started in 2014 or 2015, because contributors like the great general managers, the Ron Wolfs, the Bill Polians, the Bobby Beathard, Gil Brandt, the George Young, those guys weren't getting in prior to that because they were considered in the same discussions with modern day players. And so I think that's what hurt Dick Vermeil. I think it also hurt that when you look at his overall record, a 52% winning percentage, someone would look at that and say, well, he wasn't that good. But look closer at it. You mentioned the Eagles turned around a horrific franchise when he took over. Same thing with the Rams. And I got to know Dick certainly very well when I was in St. Louis and covering the Rams. And I put together some numbers for the committee to look at, which showed that in the third year of all his stops, including Kansas City, all of a sudden everything turned around and his teams made the playoffs. And from year 3 forward for the rest of his career in those stops, all of a sudden his winning percentage was 65%. So I think sometimes you have to dig a little deep into the weeds to look at a guy's case. But again, I think that the biggest thing was how hard it had been for coaches to be considered. But the guys with all the Super Bowls, the Tony Dungy's, of course, who still only won 1 or 2 actually. He only won 1. Guys like that were the ones who were getting in. But it was only a matter of time. He finally got in, and it's great to see him there. And I got to tell you a funny story on the Hall of Fame show that I do for Sirius. We had Jerome Bettis on a couple of weeks ago, and Joe Horrigan, who I do the show with from the Hall of Fame, gave Jerome a little bit of guff for having such a long speech when he was enshrined in Canton. So I said, hey, come on, Joe, you got to be a little easier on Jerome. The speech was long because he had to stop all the time with all the Steelers fans there, making all that ruckus.